I built this for nothing. This is our family.
Okay, Jeff. First of all, let me just say I'm so glad to have you here on our awards podcast.
Thank
I'm
you.
so excited to talk about Bikeriders because when I heard how long you'd been thinking about it, that's where I'm like, whenever a director has had the movie in the back of their mind for more than a decade, it's always a great moment where you are right now, finally getting to talk about it because you did it.
Absolutely.
So what's that like? And talk about your journey on the
Oh,
road with Bikeriders.
it's funny because, I've been working with Michael Shannon my entire career. And so I've been talking about this film for my entire career because I found the book in 2003, the book of
Mhm.
photographs that inspired it. And I've been talking to Mike about it for that long. And he's like, "You're never making that movie. Stop talking about that movie." And I showed him. So really, this was just me getting back at Michael Shannon to prove that I could actually make this movie. It's been a thing that kind of has honestly been intimidating for
Mm.
probably 15 of the 20 years that I've been carrying it. It was a book of photographs, so there's no narrative to it. There were interviews in the middle of the book, which are fascinating. But again, there's no, bigger story there. So it was challenging to have to craft that and figure that out. And then it's also not in a voice that I'm very used to. Growing up in Arkansas, going to school in North Carolina, now living in Texas, it's the Midwest wasn't an accent that I was super familiar with. And I take accent very, very, seriously. But I was able to get some recordings of the original interviews. And so I had a path. And I'm not in a biker gang. And so
You look it though. Listen.
it was a subculture that I wasn't super familiar with or super comfortable with. So, there were a lot of things that I had to kind of work through in order to actually sit down and feel confident enough to write this film. So I think that's part of the reason I carried it for
Mm.
so long.
Well, what's interesting about that is so Mike was in it from the beginning. You already knew that he was in the
Yeah.
same role.
Yes, same role.
That's
same
nuts
role.
to me because first of all, pitch perfect casting. Like
Thank
I'm
you.
sure you had such fun with that. But assembling this crew, when I look at Michael Shannon, your longtime collaborator, I feel like it's becoming like Martin Scorsese and Robert De Niro with you too.
That's flattering.
If
Thank
I
you.
see a movie without it, I'd be like, what happened? But because of that, there was something the first time you worked with him that you saw that made you say, this is a guy I want to keep working with. And I'm so intrigued what that is for that director, because it was the same thing Marty probably saw when he first cast De Niro. And it's probably the same thing that Jordan saw when he cast Daniel Kaluuya. So what
Right.
is that?
Well, and I could probably flip that and say it's something he saw in me because he
Facts.
just keeps saying yes. So there's something wrong with him too. But the truth is there is an earnestness to the way that Mike approaches acting. He is very, very intelligent. He knows the script backward and forward by the time he arrives on set. And he's really thinking about his character and how that character services the story.
Mm.
And I would have to say probably every actor doesn't do that. He's thinking about how that character contributes to the story being told, and quite often he elevates the thing that's on the page.
Yeah.
He's done it in all of my films.
Mhm.
He certainly did it in the Bikeriders.
That
And
scene where he talks about his history, man. I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt him. But
no,
that
that's it
scene,
exactly.
yeah.
I mean, that was the anecdote I was going to tell. The truth is, at the beginning of that scene, and for those of you who haven't seen the film or are going to, there's a campfire scene, and Michael Shannon's character has two big monologues in the film, both of which are somewhat drawn from interviews in the book. And his character is a part of this motorcycle club, and he talks about wanting to go to Vietnam and going to the draft board. And it's honestly kind of humorous the way the story unfolds about his mother, him being drunk and hungover, and his mom pulling him out of bed. And that night, I'm sitting there before we start filming the scene, and Mike says, "You think this is pretty funny, don't you?" And I was like, "Yeah, it is. It is funny." He was like, "I don't think it's funny." And I was like, "All right, well, let's see it." And so we're sitting there, and you've got this incredible group of actors assembled around this campfire. And
Just to paint the picture, it's Mike. It's who else is there? Tom is
Tom
there.
Hardy's there, Norman Reedus is there,
Yeah.
Bo Knapp, Carl Glusman, Emery Cohen, Jodie Comer,
Austin Butler.
like Austin Butler. Yeah, I don't know why they came
Yeah.
last, but And Mike starts talking, and everybody, Damon Harriman,
Yeah.
everybody starts laughing because they're supposed to. But then he does this thing at the end where he says, they didn't accept him. And they said he was undesirable. We don't want you. And the way he said that, like everyone's faces dropped. And that wasn't really in the script. It was all there. I had written the scene, but not like that.
Yeah.
And that's what Michael Shannon does. He took a scene that I thought was very good and he made it better. And it was actually really interesting because Norman Reedus was there. And he was so nice to come in really just for a few days and nights. And his character kind of first shows up to the club in that period and ends up hanging out with the club for many years. And he was like, that's it. Like, that's why I stick around. Because it wasn't really explicit in the screenplay. He was like, I stick around because of the story that guy's telling. And that was just all because of Michael Shannon's performance. So what Mike does is he just makes my stuff better.
He just makes it
Quite simply. That's what he does with dialogue. Then it's what he does when he's not talking. That's incredible too. So I really owe my career to Mike.
And again, I love seeing your collaborations because as many looks as you've given him in your film, he's done about 80 more in other places. But I
Sure.
think there is something very, like when I saw him show up in this, I was like, well, of course. And it was so pitch perfect. But with the other people that you bring along, I feel like with this film, it feels like actor Avengers. Like it really did feel like you cast some superheroes here.
Yeah.
But as a I'd feel intimidated as a reporter doing a set
Boyd
visit
Holbrook.
that
I didn't
day.
even mention
Yes,
Boyd Holbrook.
Thank
Boyd
you.
Holbrook's sitting there like, oh my gosh. Like it's an embarrassment of riches as
What
a
is that
director.
like?
But I stepped on your question. Sorry.
No, it's a good one to step over because we want to give Boyd his crew because he's so good in this too.
Yeah.
And again, it's like you could forget how many heavy hitters you have. What's that like? Because I'd be intimidated walking onto that set to just do a set visit. I wonder for you, first of all, the cast you got, knowing how big this movie got. Was that a sort of different dynamic, knowing that you were coming in with this very heavy cast, a bigger budget, or was that making it easier? What was that like for you, sort of walking on with these sort of new pressures, I would say, compared to your previous films?
Well, ultimately, it made the work easier. I mean, it makes the film better because they're all so good.
Mm.
And the truth is, it is an embarrassment of riches, but what it really is depth. You've got your character in the foreground, and then you've got 4 guys behind him, and they're all doing something. And so anytime, and I usually don't shoot multiple cameras, but in this we would put up multiple cameras when we could, when lighting would allow it, because we shoot on film. And so, because there were always these faces to grab, and these guys are always doing something. And I have to give so much credit to them because, they were there the whole time. And it's not like they always had lines even in the scenes, but they're back there, they're doing stuff, they're constantly working. And it's because they're professionals. And they're not only professionals, they're really, really good at what they do. So, at the end of the day, between action and cut is all that really matters. And that's what you're there to collect. And that's what people are going to see. And that's what people are going to remember. You asked if I was nervous. I wasn't nervous, but I don't know. I love actors and I love film sets and I wanted people to have a good time. So I think I was definitely holding something in my mind that I wanted to give everyone time, which you don't have a lot of on a film set. And I wanted everybody to know how much I appreciated them being there because I needed them. And I actually needed them to be there in the background in all of these scenes until their moment comes and then their character gets to, speak for a moment and then recede in the background or whatever it is. I was just so appreciative. So that's kind of what I had on my mind. That and the fact that it was like, and I'm pretty much going to put all of you on motorcycles at some point without helmets
Yes.
that are 60, 70 years old.
Oh my God.
And I want you guys to be safe and stick around.
That was the thing about
stressful.
this too. I've never lived in that time. I don't even think I would even be able to contemplate the Midwest. But from the first frame of this, the world building that this thing did from like the initial part was
Thank you.
so incredible. A huge part of that is the Austin Butler character and just
Sure.
how much of that time do you spend before you get like how much of that do you let go when you're trying to be, or were you on this one where it's like, I know with some people they're like Christopher Nolan, for example, he's like, no, if it wasn't there, it's just never going to be a part of it.
There was one photo in particular from the book, and it was a color photograph, and I sent it to every department, and I basically was like, look, this is success for us. Look at the density in this photograph. Look at the soda they're drinking in the bottle. Look at the grease underneath the edges of their fingernails. Look at the way the patches are sewn on. Look at the detail in the jackets. Look at the hair. Look at the amount of dirt on their faces and on their clothes. And then look at the bikes and look at the colors of the bikes and the different fuel tanks. Like if we can have a frame in our film that feels as complete and dense as this, then we've done something very special.
Wow.
And I think we pulled it off because of the crew people, because of my cinematographer, my production designer, my costume designer. Like these people came together at the top of their game, and it's really interesting. You know, I think a lot of period pieces sometimes it's kind of in vogue to give them a look in terms of in post. You know, how you treat the image so that it has kind of an old antique vibe to it. We didn't do that. We shot this film on film, which does have an effect, but we shot it on film the same way we shot Mud, the same way we shot Take Shelter. But it was the layers of the clothes and the hair and the makeup and the production design, these sets, these bikes, everything kind of added together so that when you took this photograph, it had that density that I was looking for. And I really was kind of in awe of the artistry that was going on that I'm not really a part of. I don't make that stuff. I just show them a picture and say, hey guys, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this?
Yeah.
And they did it. And I'm just so proud of everybody. I'm proud of that work because I know it was a lot of work.
You're like, I know. I think to a certain extent, I think listening to you talk about your cast and listening to your cast talk about you, I think that freedom is what they all enjoy working with you about. The fact that you are enlisting them because they're very talented, high caliber people,
Yeah.
but then you're not trying to pigeonhole them in boxes like marionettes. Have you, because that's the thing I think you've said as far as like, if they're coming on set, they should already know. Like you're bringing them on set to bring like what Michael brings and to bring what Jody
Yeah.
brings, and with Tom, that's not, most directors are not that freewheeling with control. Is
Well,
that?
I don't know. You know, it's funny, and it all goes back to Michael Shannon, like how I direct. It was very obvious to me very quickly that I was not as intelligent as Michael Shannon. So, you know, I think there's some idea. I don't know if it's like, you know, Legends of Hitchcock or whatever else that like you're manipulating these actors. That just seems like such a foolish approach, especially for me. So I take a really pragmatic view of how I speak to actors. I spend a lot of time on these screenplays. And Michael Shannon realizes that and I think respects it. But anytime an actor has a question, I'm not trying to psychoanalyze anything or talk in thematics or anything else. I just try to say very plainly, well, this is what I was thinking when I wrote that line. And this is what I think you're doing. This is what I'm seeing out of what you're doing in this take, and this take, and this take. Usually that answers it. I think sometimes when people talk about freedom, they're thinking about improv or other things. And that's not really the point. The films are heavily scripted. And, you know, I kind of dream this stuff before I show up. So the shots are really, you know, pretty well mapped out. It's really just about having everybody's on the same page. Everyone's trying to get to the same emotion, or everyone's trying to get to the same point in a scene. And I just try to be really straightforward with people. And I think they pick up on that. Like acting has to be the most vulnerable thing a person could do, especially in this sense, because, you know, unlike in theater, you really control the audience, you control the speed, where you are. In a film, you show up for these little bits and pieces, and then it's mine. Then I take it, and I'm in control. And so that has to be an incredibly frustrating thing for actors. And so you want to make sure they know that you know what they're doing, that you see it, that you understand it, and that it is actually in line with this bigger plan that you have that's baked out of this screenplay. So I don't know. That's kind of my approach.
I mean, look, the proof is in the pudding. Just looking at this cast, it's I would say one of the bigger ones that you've ever directed, and definitely with
Just in number.
just in number. But in that, which I think is so funny, and I know this wasn't by design, especially considering I think everyone's got some kind of comic book credit at this point in Hollywood.
Yeah.
But, adding like Bane, getting some Zod, getting some, you got Logan, people popping up here. You got a lot of MCU. And I have to, between DC and MCU, I want to know a little bit about the Jeff Nichols Aquaman. I just want to know a little bit about what it was going to be, because I have a feeling it would be absolutely something that we're going to miss that we didn't get a chance to see.
Oh, I don't know about that. And I've talked about it a little bit, but it's
like, are you? I know you're glad that it didn't go that way, but is there anything you would have wanted to maybe see in your version? Because, as you say, directors dream about the shots before they shoot them. Is there something you'd be like, I would have loved to have seen this moment?
I don't know. I think the ocean's really beautiful. And, like I watch all those documentaries, is it Blue Planet and that stuff? Like, that's such a lame answer.
I'm never going to get you the answer to this. It's okay. It's just that in the back of my mind, I think of when I felt watching something like Loving, and that sort of like that ethereal way that they walk through there, they walk through the fields. Like, I'm picturing that kind of love story underneath the ocean.
100%. And, like when you saw the first trailer for Man of Steel, I mean, it felt like a trailer to a Terrence Malick film.
Exactly.
And I remember thinking like, oh, thank God they've done it. Like, they've finally done it, And I got to meet Zach briefly, and Mike loves Zach and has a lot of respect for him, And Chloe, directed one of the films, and these filmmakers are incredible. I think it's tricky.
Yeah.
It's tricky when like the stakes are literally either the planet or the universe.
Yeah.
That's a lot to demand.
Yeah.
And so I think my approach probably would have been less about that, although inevitably that has to happen. But, superheroes are going to have the same issues that other people have. They're afraid of their loved ones getting hurt or dying. And it's why I'm against two things: time travel
Okay.
and invincibility.
Fair.
Like we have to understand how people are hurt, because otherwise there's no drama. And it's why time travel's so bad as a storytelling device. Because if you can travel in time, then there's no death. And if there's no death, there's no drama.
That's the ultimate fade to black, right?
There you go.
Like, if you can't get there, we're never going to get to the ultimate.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know how I ultimately would have handled it, but those are the things I guess I would have been thinking about.
The only reason why I asked that is I do think you're such an intentional director on the things that you've done. And looking at your filmography, I can definitely tell, I'm sure at some point people were offering you different things. And I think you've just been so intentional about the things that you do. When I think about this film, I went back and looked at you have this very early interview from Shotgun.
Yeah.
And you're talking about Joe.
Oh.
And if there was ever a movie that you were not obviously involved in that one, but if there was ever a book that I felt inspired a movie that wasn't about it, there is so much of Joe in Mud.
You read Joe?
Yes.
Larry Brown is one of my favorite writers. Have you ever read Big Bad Love?
No, I haven't. And the only reason why I read Joe, I will be truthful on that, was because of that interview and because of Mud. And
what a beautiful thing. When there's a scene where he gets shot with buckshot, and he has to pick it out in the mirror, and that was the basis for the kind of legend behind Shotgun Stories in that film. Yeah, I got to meet Larry Brown. I love Larry Brown's writing. Sorry, I got lost in the question.
No, my
when
question
you said
was
Joe.
basically like that book. I feel like, again, you started talking about there. I feel like that book it reverberates in so much of your filmography. It's in Shotgun. It's in Mud. It's in this. I feel like there's a level of people longing for belonging in that book that just, again, it sort of reverberates through that. Do you think that is because of the subject matter of young men, or is that just been like Jeff Nichols from the early days when you were trying to get into your local Arkansas theater?
Well, I think that's humanity's problem that we're trying to solve. I think everybody's just desperate for identity.
Yeah.
Because identity gives us purpose. That's really what the Bikeriders is about. But a lot of the films, you're searching for some unique quality in yourself. And a lot of people find it in groups. And the more unique that group is, the more unique their identity is. And that can be a really positive thing, but it can also be a really negative thing. Yeah. And that's certainly what the Bikeriders is about. But, people searching for their place in the world and searching for meaning, for me, it's masculine because I'm a guy, and that's the lens that I see the world through. But I bet everybody deals with it, and
Fair.
everybody feels a bit like a fraud and a bit like an outsider. And there's positive things that can come out of that, but there's also a lot of danger that can come out of that,
Yeah.
and that interests me. And that's really ultimately why the Bikeriders, it felt like a film worthy of making, because it's one thing just to go through everything that we've talked about in terms of, the artistry to bring the 1960s back to life in the Midwest and these bikes and these hairstyles and clothes. But what for? Like, why are we going through all the trouble? And we're going through all the trouble to connect with people and to maybe just say, hey, look, you may not have ever ridden a motorcycle. You may not give a shit about any of these guys, but they're probably feeling some of the same things you're feeling. And that's okay to be reminded of. And when movies, when they emotionally affect us, they stick with us. And not enough movies do that, is the truth. And sure, certainly it's personal and whether you connect with the film or not, but there are those films that when they really penetrate you emotionally, they're no longer disposable. Every film starts disposable.
Oh, wow.
And it's Kleenex, and it's like, I'll use it and throw it away and whatever. But when they actually get in there, then they become something else. Then they become cinema, which is cool.
That's a great way to put it. When it stops becoming disposable, it becomes cinema. I know you have to get out of here, and I want to make sure, though, I cannot get out of here without talking about at least one of the trio that I feel lead this between Jodie, Tom, and Austin. But I
Yes.
specifically want to talk about Jodie Comer because
Please.
she just murders this. And if there was anything that is in support of the entire movie, everything is in support of her journey. And I just love
Yes.
that, as it's not about her, obviously it's about the Bikeriders, but she's so the lens of this movie. But what I
Yeah.
was going to ask you about with her is casting her. I was surprised to know you hadn't seen Killing Eve when you cast her.
No.
Like,
Well, I hadn't seen Killing Eve when her name first came up.
Okay.
Um, and then I obviously went and watched it as quickly as I could. But and it's great, But I'm a moron. I really didn't know what I had, if I'm being honest, And you don't really. You take Francine Maisler, my casting director, is a genius, so you take her advice. You listen to other people, and they're like, you gotta. Like I remember that happened with Adam Driver. I hadn't seen Girls when I cast him in Midnight Special, and everybody's like, "Good, you have to go talk to Adam Driver." I was like, okay. And now we're really close friends, and I hope to collaborate with him more. I mean, he's an exceptional actor, but at the time, you're kind of like, taking the temperature of the room. But then you go meet with the person, and that's when it starts to get really interesting. And my first conversation with Jodie, which was over Zoom, was really interesting. The way she talked about Kathy. The trick was, because we had interviews in the book, and Kathy was the most interesting. That's just the fact, And she tells the anecdote kind of that opens the film with her going into this bar and this guy staying outside of her house all night long and her kind of falling in love. It's really beautiful. And when I think about Kathy, both from these interviews, but really the Kathy that then I, fictionalized and created, I just love her. I think she's complex. I think at times she's frustrating and short-sighted, but then she's also introspective and self-deprecating, and then she can always take the piss out of these bikers. I just love her. And when I spoke to Jodie for the first time, she spoke about her the same way. And it was like, well, this is good. But again, I'm a moron. And then I was coming back. I was on the jury of Cannes, and I was coming back through London to actually meet Tom Hardy for the first time and talk to him. And that night I had tickets to her one-woman show, Prima Facie, which was on the West End. And
she just won a Tony for
which
as well,
she just
when
won a
came
Tony
here
for.
after an Olivier.
And, it's a one-woman show. She's on stage for an hour and a half at least, all by herself. And I walked out of that play just going, wow, I'm the luckiest director in the world. There's no one that can watch that play and not say Jodie Comer's one of the greatest actors working
Saw it
today.
in New York. Absolutely incredible. Yeah.
Right? And so, I walked out of that and just said, well, I have an ace up my sleeve now. Wait till Jodie gets here.
It's going to be really good. Last thing I will say, I've always wanted to talk to you about this because you grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm definitely from small town Alabama. Both
Yeah.
you and your brother are artists.
Yes.
What was it about your family that cultivated this artist spirit? Because I know where we come from. I know the isolation of not liking the ubiquitous part of football, beer, and country music. And
I like all those things.
I do too. But if you like anything else, they get suspicious.
true. No, Southerners are great. You know, my parents were very supportive. My dad was a small business owner. He owned a furniture store, piano store first, and then a furniture store. And I think there was something about that kind of entrepreneurial spirit. He never said, "What about your real plan? What about your real job?" And I can't talk, too much about how important that is. Because I'm a pretty straight-laced guy. I think, and I'm a responsible guy. I think had someone said like, "Okay, go get a job," I would have. And instead he was like, my dad to this day is the first person that reads anything I write and the first phone call I make. And the first thing he always says is, "It's brilliant."
Aw.
Now it's not, but that doesn't mean you don't need to hear it, especially first up. Then you can go get all the criticism. So.
No, I appreciate that. Well, I think Bikeriders is fresh, almost certified fresh, and every movie that you've done has been like lauded, and you've done all right, sir. Done all right. Done all right.
I'm real lucky with the algorithms.
I was just saying,
I'm
sir,
doing pretty good.
Doing pretty good. Thank you so much for your time, and
Thank you.
congratulations on the film.